Welcome back, Sailor. Lovely to see you as always. We are still at church, which means I want to talk about blasphemy. And I'm not talking about the Salem witches, even though Melville has already referenced them. I'm talking about the Christians in Moby Dick. Yes, because as pious as our American forefathers, the Pilgrims, were, the whole reason they came to America was because someone thought they were blasphemous. Ostensibly, there's not a lot on the surface of this next chapter, but boy do I have a lot to say about it. But I'll keep most of those comments to the end so that I don't disrupt too much of the flow of this chapter. But with that said, let's waste no more time. Let's read a damn book. Chapter 8. The Pulpit. I had not been seated very long ere a man of a certain venerable robustness entered. Immediately as the storm-pelted door flew back upon admitting him, a quick regardful eyeing of him by all the congregation sufficiently attested that this fine old man was the chaplain. Yes, it was the famous Father Mapple, so called by the whalemen, among whom he was a very great favorite. He had been a sailor and a harpooneer in his youth, but for many years past had dedicated his life to the ministry. At the time I now write of, Father Mapple was in the hardy winter of a healthy old age, that sort of old age which seems merging into a second flowering youth. For among all the fissures of his wrinkles there shone certain mild gleams of a newly developing bloom, the spring verdure peeping forth even beneath February's snow. No one having previously heard his history could for the first time behold Father Mapple without the utmost interest, because there were certain engrafted clerical peculiarities about him, imputable to that adventurous maritime life he had led. When he entered, I observed that he carried no umbrella, and certainly had not come in his carriage, for his tarpaulin hat ran down with melting sleet, and his great pilot cloth jacket seemed almost to drag him to the floor with the weight of the water it had absorbed. However, hat and coat and overshoes were one by one removed and hung up in a little space in an adjacent corner, when, arrayed in a decent suit, he quietly approached the pulpit. Like most old-fashioned pulpits, it was a very lofty one, and since irregular stairs to such a height would, by its long angle with the floor, seriously contract the already small area of the chapel, the architect, it seemed, had acted upon the hint of Father Mapple and finished the pulpit without a stairs, substituting a perpendicular side ladder, like those used in mounting a ship from a boat at sea. The wife of a whaling captain had provided the chapel with a handsome pair of red worsted man-ropes for his ladder, which, being itself nicely headed and stained with a mahogany color, the whole contrivance, considering what manner of a chapel it was, seemed by no means in bad taste. Halting for an instant at the foot of the ladder, and with both hands grasping the ornamental knobs of the man-ropes, Father Mapple cast a look upwards, and then, with a truly sailor-like but still reverential dexterity, hand over hand mounted the steps as if ascending the main top of his vessel. The perpendicular parts of this side ladder, as is usually the case with swinging ones, were of cloth-covered rope. Only the rounds were of wood, so that at every step there was a joint. At my first glimpse of the pulpit, it had not escaped me that, however convenient for a ship, these joints in the present instance seemed unnecessary. For I was not prepared to see Father Mapple, after gaining the height, slowly turn round and, stooping over the pulpit, deliberately drag up the ladder step by step till the whole was deposited within, leaving him impregnable in his little Quebec. I pondered some time without fully comprehending the reason for this. Father Mapple enjoyed such a wide reputation for sincerity and sanctity that I could not suspect him of courting notoriety by any mere tricks of the stage. No, thought I. There must be some sober reason for this thing. Furthermore, it must symbolize something unseen. That line is so important to me, but we're not going to derail things now. We'll get into it at the end. Can it be, then, that By the act of physical isolation, he signifies his spiritual withdrawal for the time from all outward worldly ties and connections. Yes, for replenished with the meat and wine of the world to the faithful man of God, this pulpit I see is a self-containing stronghold, a lofty Ehrenbreitstein with a perennial well of water within the walls. Ehrenbreitstein is a German fortress. But the side ladder was not the only strange feature of the place borrowed from the chaplain's former seafarings. Between the marble cenotaphs on either hand of the pulpit, the wall which formed its back was adorned with a large painting representing a gallant ship beating against a terrible storm off a lee coast of black rocks and snowy breakers. But high above the flying scud and dark rolling clouds there floated a little isle of sunlight, from which beamed forth an angel's face. And this bright face shed a distinct spot of radiance upon the ship's tossed deck, something like that silver plate now inserted in the Victory's plank, where Nelson fell. "Ah, noble ship," the angel seemed to say, beat on, thou noble ship, and bear a hardy helm. For lo, the sun is breaking through, the clouds are rolling off, serenest Asia is at hand." Nor was the pulpit itself without a trace of the same sea taste that had achieved the ladder in the picture. Its paneled front was in the likeness of a ship's bluff bows, and the Holy Bible rested on a projecting piece of scrollwork fashioned after a ship's fiddle-headed beak. What could be more full of meaning? For the pulpit is ever this earth's foremost part. All the rest comes in its rear. Do not laugh at comes in its rear. The pulpit leads the world. From thence it is the storm of God's quick wrath is first descried, and the bow must bear the earliest brunt. From thence it is the god of breezes, fair or foul, is first invoked for favorable winds. Yes, the world's a ship on its passage out, and not a voyage complete, and the pulpit is its prow. And that's the chapter. On one hand, not a whole lot happened other than the preacher walking into the church. On the other hand, Ishmael is noticing the peculiarities of this church, which on one hand, the peculiarities of this church can easily be explained with just, this is a whaling city, they built this chapel out of what they had at hand, which was largely parts of ships. But Ishmael seems convinced that these things must symbolize something unseen. I mentioned that line is really important to me because to me, that is Melville and Ishmael inviting us to take a closer look at this text. Not just in this chapter, in the entire book. He's challenging us to dig deeper into these metaphors, to gain some sort of knowledge that's not being expressly told to us by the lines of the book. So I want to share some of the peculiarities that I noticed in this chapter. There's no mention of a cross anywhere, and instead we have a giant painting of a ship. Where else have we seen a giant painting of a ship? Back at the Spouter Inn, where Ishmael was looking at the painting, and he remarks that at first you almost thought some ambitious young artist in the time of the New England hags had endeavored to delineate chaos bewitched. And so far, these are the only two paintings that are mentioned in the book. And they bear a lot of similarities to each other, don't they? They're both ships in the middle of chaotic storms. One has a leviathan whale bearing down on top of the ship, and the other has an angel peering through the clouds. One is in a bar, a den of sin, and is mentioned in the same sentence as the Salem witches. The other is prominently featured in a church where one would normally imagine a cross to be. So does that seem blasphemous or peculiar to you? Because it does to me. And I'm going to reference here the second commandment in Exodus 24, which I'm reading from my monitor right now. "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. And there are so many different interpretations of that. There are some who interpret that passage to mean that the creation of art is in itself sinful. Others would say it's not the creation of art, it's the worship of graven images, carved idols. Well, let's go back to the Spouter Inn, where we have sailors who are furiously carving scrimshander into the benches, and where Queequeg himself worships his idol. Again, Spouter Inn, den of sin. But there are other interpretations of this to say that the point isn't that you shouldn't create art or images. The point is that you shouldn't go seeking in art the truth that the Bible lays plain for you. All of life's mysteries can be solved with the Word of God in the Bible. There is a Bible in this church. In fact, that's kind of the only recognizably Christian thing in this church. Now, is the Bible the only work of art that we need as humans? Let's look at any other mentions of art in Moby Dick so far. We have the painting of Chaos Bewitched. We have the drunken carved scrimshander in the Spouter Inn. We have Queequeg's idol. We have this painting that's taking the place of a cross in the church. And we also have Ishmael mentioning his life in chapter 1 being a play that was written by the Fates, a reference to Greco-Roman paganism. And even to consider the Bible itself a work of art is kind of blasphemous in and of itself, isn't it? Because it's supposed to be the Word of God, not an artistic creation. So where does that leave us with this? The book Moby Dick. Should we be looking deeper? Is it blasphemous to search for deeper meaning in these pages? I don't think so. So let's go back to this last passage here in the chapter. What could be more full of meaning? For the pulpit is ever this earth's foremost part. And then he goes on to say, yes, the world's a ship on its passage out, and not a voyage complete, and the pulpit is its prow. Is he saying that without our connection to God, we are lost at sea? Possibly. And I can't stress enough how this is just my interpretation, and I have no right to tell anyone that if they disagree with me that they are wrong. But I think that interpretation falls a little short for me personally, because Ishmael's not really talking about our connection to the Christian God. He's talking about God in more philosophical terms, and as this sort of detached force of chaos that is larger than humanity and responsible for all the world around us. It's good and it's bad. The god of breezes, fair or foul. And Melville could have said that the pulpit is its prow and God is its captain, but he didn't. We're the captain. And to me, what Melville is saying, what makes us lost in chaos isn't our attachment or detachment to God, it's our detachment from interpreting what is around us, from interpreting God. But we'll wrap things up there. A much deeper dive than usual, but hey, Ishmael dared me. As always, thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next episode.